Welcome back to the Turndown. Today we have absolute hospitality royalty with us. Suzanne Speak, the Managing Director of Radisson Hotel Group for the UK and Ireland. Now, when you sit down with an executive of one of the world's most recognizable hotel brands, you might expect the first topic of conversation to be expansion, or RevPAR, or maybe even the secret of crafting the ultimate room service club sandwich. But you would be wrong. Instead, we're kicking off today's interview by talking about something a lot of people are sweating over, literally. We're diving straight into the realities of menopause. That's right. Before we talk about running hotels, we're talking about hot flashes in the boardroom, navigating brain fog, and why this deeply human experience is something we all need to be talking about out loud. Suzanne brings her signature candor, leadership, and humor to a topic that is finally getting the spotlight it deserves. Here's my conversation with the fabulous Suzanne Speak. Hi there. Suzanne, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I want to kick us off with our sort of standard introduction question, which is, what keeps you up at night these days?
Hmm. Oh, well, I have a 17-year-old son, so that normally does the trick. But in truth, Mother Nature. I'm at that stage in my life where I don't really have a choice, but the night sweats and sleep deprivation, that's the stage of life that I'm at. So
So what's causing it? What's the name?
menopause.
Menopause.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Um,
am, as you will gather, quite passionate about talking about this. I think it's important that we do break that stigma and that
Understood.
reality of that's the stage I'm at.
And, you know, I want to sort of expand a little bit on this. How does menopause show up for you in a normal working day? What does it do?
It can manifest in many ways. It varies, and I appreciate that not no two women are the same. So when I'm speaking about this, I'm speaking about my experience. But yes, the lack of sleep, but I'm quite good at managing that. The the fatigue, the energy. Sometimes it manifests with that real lack of motivation, where it takes that more energy and just that more drive to have to get up to finish something. Other days, it's maybe more the brain fog, or the memory. Not so long ago, I had to make my son a dentist appointment, and as I'm talking to the receptionist, I swear I couldn't remember his name. It took me
Mhm.
10 seconds to remember my own son's name, and I see the humorous side on that now. And yes, I had a giggle with my girlfriends and stuff, but that stuff's real, and that's quite scary when you have that just that blip when you're thinking, "Wow, what's going on here?" And you know, personally, I'm probably still the offspring of the era where our parents didn't really talk about these things. Yes, I was aware of menopause, but
Mhm.
was I educated in it? No. So you kind of learn as you go along. And, you know, that's, it's a lot to take in, especially when you get to that point of your career where your son is a bit older. You've now got a bit more freedom. You work so hard from the ages of 16, 17 through the ladder like I have done. I've climbed the. And you get to that point of where you think, okay, good, this is a bit of me time. And then Mother Nature hits you with a curveball that you're not expecting.
When you say, and I'm very curious,
Mm,
when you say you're managing your sleep deprivation or
mhm.
lack of sleep, what do you do?
I just keep going.
Okay.
Um, you know, I have supplements from my own diet, you know, I did have a period there before I actually realized of what was going on of, you're overindulging in caffeine or, you know, a fizzy drink, just something to keep you going. But I recognized that quite early on. And I do focus a little bit more on my well-being, with supplement support. There's a lot of resource, a lot of things out there, which is fantastic. Um, but you just when like, I'm also a single mom, so when you're a mom as well as working full time, you just have got to keep going. And just it could be an Irish thing, I don't know, but it's just I come from a very strong line of women, so yeah.
You're at the peak of your career in
Mhm.
hospitality, right? I mean, you are managing a large amount of
Mhm.
employees. You've gone through various careers in hospitality, and something is hitting you, right? Is impacting you. Why do you think it hits so hard right now? Why does it have an impact on you?
I guess for my journey, when I took on this role of MD in January 2024, the timing was impeccable. The two things almost went hand in hand, that transition period. And yes, you take on a bigger role, you have more responsibility. Okay. And sometimes, it's so difficult when what people don't see really impacts what people do see. So there's been times, does that make sense?
Mhm.
There have been times when I have to always be visibly on. My role is to be visible, to be present. And I think with some of the symptoms of menopause, be it the brain fog, be it the anxiety almost at times, be it the lack of concentration, anything, whatever, even the physical side of things, when you're in a board meeting and you are overheating and you physically become red, there's a self consciousness in that as well. So you have a lot to deal with, but it's unforeseen. Um, like today, doing this, um, when we agreed to do all of this, I was great. I was excited. It's things that I love to do. But over the weekend, and some yesterday morning, I'm kind of thinking, oh, I'm a little bit, am I nervous because I'm not a nervous person? Am I
Mhm.
anxious? I'm not an anxious person. But yet those emotions can still creep in. So,
You said that, we don't talk enough about it inside of hospitality, and you want to take on a more active role in demystifying and educating,
mhm,
and I applaud you for that, right? Hospitality talks endlessly about well-being, right? What do you think you need to do, or what do you think we as an industry need to do in order to make, I guess, menopause more inclusive and visible and, I guess, sensitize people around it?
yeah, it's almost like we have to normalize it, remove the stigma.
Okay.
I would I would love to see, we have so many, and I know I've worked for Hilton before, I've worked for Marriott before. We have great leadership programs. For me, I would love to embed the education about and the awareness of menopause into those leadership programs. This is not just about women, it's about men understanding it also,
Mhm.
you know? And not just for hospitality, but I would like to see, and I see movements towards this for any industry. We have seen such a rise in women in leadership for so long, for the last 10 years especially. We now need to close that gap of what, to support them because that's important to, to create that condition that all people can thrive. I would love to see a benefit added in to for women's benefits almost, where it's black and white in that employee handbook when anybody, whether it be a receptionist, somebody in the kitchen, or a manager, hits that point in their life, there is a resource and there is support that that person can go straight to, and it's in black and white. That's what I would like to see.
That's amazing. I look forward seeing that implemented amongst the organization. What do you think leaders today get wrong when they think they're being supportive of women experiencing menopause?
I think many leaders, and it's understandable, they probably assume a quick fix is have some time off. They're supportive that way. But menopause is is a long term phase. That requires systematic flexibility. Um, we have to translate the understanding into policy. It's not an illness. It's a condition. It's a phase of life.
Okay. You mentioned that you want from an employee handbook or from an employee process support to anyone in any level
Mhm.
hitting menopause. Are there any other changes that you would, want to see implemented to support women through menopause in hospitality?
Um, I think that would be a start, and I think
Okay.
things will evolve. I am not. Do I? I'm the start of the journey of it. Do I know enough about it to try to make those recommendations?
Yeah.
from what I read. But, with the support that I've reached out to, I think if we were to signpost people to that, that's endless. They're the experts.
Yeah.
You know, I think as women, we have accountability ourselves. I think we
Correct.
have to talk about it. Silence doesn't mean comfort. I think that we can't assume that the employer must do, A, B, C, and D. We have our part to play in this too. And I think it's important that we do. You know, I, if you don't mind, I'll tell you, when I went to Brussels to do a presentation with my boss, and I was first time meeting in Brussels. It was one of our head offices, and it was a pretty big, important board meeting. And myself and other MDs from parts of the world, we were talking and conversing. We were putting so much effort into what we were doing. I was prepared, but the execution was a car crash. It was awful. And these were new bosses to me as well. So I wasn't, I came back home and I'm thinking, the presentation was great, but the delivery, it was just one of those days that, headaches, the
Mhm.
anxiety came in, just that clarity of brain fog. It was very difficult to articulate what I was trying to portray. In my mind, it was working, but for me, it wasn't. And, I came home and I thought about it. And, the next day I thought, no, I'm gonna ring my COO. So I called him up on Teams, and there was silence. And for a second, I had to interpret what would did that silence mean? What's this all about? But it wasn't. He gave me so much respect. He really just stopped everything and just listened. And that was probably the first time I really experienced true listening and the impact that had. And it was great because he had a very open conversation with me, and he understood. He respected me more for, phoning up and saying, this is where I was in this. So subconsciously, I guess as well, that's given me more confidence to bring it forward because I know I have that support and I know that he now understands. And that's a big part of that barrier that I was finding in my progression.
As I'm listening to the story, I can't help myself but feeling, you know, that it must have taken you quite some energy and, to actually phone up to have that
Mhm.
conversation. It must
Oh
have
yeah.
been quite a hurdle for you to take that leap of faith. But that's amazing.
I you know, I felt strongly. I thought the only way I'm going to get over this is by confronting it.
Mhm.
And I didn't want it happening again. So, we've had meetings since then, similar styles, and he and I will have a conversation almost like a car park chat before I go into that meeting if I needed to. Um, but I have to adapt the way I do things. Like I make notes for a lot of things now. I've always, I've always kind of thought I had a great memory and a
Uh-huh.
great, I could memorize things. I could, but there's times when you just physically can't. It's the scariest thing, you know. Like, can you, you have children. Could you imagine forgetting one of their names? And that's the truth. you know. And luckily, the receptionist found this funny side of it, and but yeah.
I mean, I always call one the other name and vice versa, right? So I don't
Uh,
know if that's we're getting it, but I get your point, right? Like
mhm.
when you're suddenly drawing a blank and
Yeah.
that brain fog that
And
that
that's the word, "it's drawing a blank." That's the phrase, "it's drawing a blank." But, we have, like we talk in Radisson, one of our strap lines is a lot about memorable moments. I work with a lot of phenomenal women, and we now have a WhatsApp chat called Menopausal Moments. And it's endearing. It is so funny. One day I might even publish it, but it's actually very real. And it is the day in the life of what and we support one another. So we know when we have owners' meetings or board meetings or doing presentations with students or doing leadership programs that we will send those kind of motivational comments. But some of it is very, very funny.
Yeah, for all its impact on life and work and, your well-being, there are probably comical moments in there too, right? Especially the moment after or the next week or when you have a bit of distance where you'll say,
Mm,
"Oh my god, I can't believe that just
mm.
happened."
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Mm. We had one situation where we had someone. I'll go into the story. We had somebody who had couldn't find the car in the car park, and police were called out at one point. Definitely was going to report it stolen. To realize they had come in their partner's car.
Yeah.
Just so, those funny things. But then there's the more serious side to it as well, you know?
Yeah,
But it's the
absolutely.
humorous side of things that keep us going, I guess.
Suzanne, we drove straight into it, but
I
for
know.
many listeners in the program, they don't know you, right?
Mhm.
You are the managing director of the UK and Ireland for Radisson Hotel Group.
Yes.
That's an enormous title. I'm be
Mhm.
curious to sort of say, what do you do, right? What's your role in the organization?
Well, my role as a senior leader is to support the portfolio in the UK and Ireland. So I support the hotels, I support the owners of these hotels. We have different contract types. We have franchise, we have managed hotels. I'm more actively involved in the managed hotels because we're responsible for that performance. With the franchise hotel, it's the largest portfolio. I'm responsible for the brand, for the compliance, for the relationship with the owners. I also have, direct responsibilities in the UK for, your health and safety and your financial compliance, um, and very much for succession planning and leadership. So we invest very heavily within Radisson on our leadership programs. We have our own Radisson Academy, and all the senior leaders are very invested and have accountability in those areas as well.
I want to talk about the current state of hospitality in your region, because
Hmm.
I mean that is must be a quite an interesting one.
Yes.
What's going on in the UK and Ireland when it comes to hospitality?
Okay, Ireland. Ireland is strong. Okay,
Okay.
Ireland. That's my homeland. It is strong. It has totally rebounded since the pandemic, and we are seeing great growth in conversions and new openings and in ADR, even outside of the hub of Dublin. You know, everything from Limerick, Galway, Cork. We're seeing such great growth. So Ireland, yes, is strong. UK is the sector's a bit more of a different dynamic. Um, Strong demand, yes, especially in those event hubs like your Manchester, your Liverpool, your Birminghams, but cost pressures are rising. There, I can see that having an impact. You have the cost of construction, the cost of labour, the business rates increase. There is a lot of factors that I see impacting the UK more than Ireland. The the growth plan is aggressive for Radisson within the UK, the same as it is for Ireland, and that is happening. But we were, for example, hoping to open another 2 brand new builds by 2027. That is being prolonged now because of the cost of construction and, different elements. So, yeah, UK is tougher, Ireland is stronger in terms of the rebound.
So in Ireland, you're experiencing more tailwinds and less cost pressures?
I think, there's still cost pressures, but it just hasn't come to the forefront as much as what I'm seeing in the UK.
Mhm.
Um, the I think as well, when I take a look at Ireland, the domestic and the international tourism is strong. You know, I was actually talking to a colleague not so long ago when everywhere I look on social media or be it on some sort of, live platform, Ireland are really good at storytelling. Their country marketing is excellent. Everywhere I go, I see something like I've seen Irish people living in Bangkok to different parts of America to different parts of Europe. And I guess as part of their livelihood, they're doing a lot of social media blogging. But even wherever they're living at in the world, and us Irish are known to travel, they are still 90% of their blogs are about go and visit Ireland. And it's because it's so authentic, it's so true, it's so honest. And there's a real, I guess, patriotism where they're showing off the country. I'm not joking you. Some of these I'm listening to or watching have got millions of followers, and I do think subconsciously that has an impact on the tourism in that country. You know, they're better at storytelling than perhaps I see in the UK. And I don't think we can deny the UK's had its fair share of ups and downs recently. If you take a look at what we witnessed, I guess, last summer with
Mhm.
the rioting and the things in the streets, that does have an impact, not only in that area, but also from, I guess, international perception. And we see that now hitting the headlines more. And I think we have to admit that as leaders, we have to see that. Um, Another is the ease in the UK. Life in the UK seems harder. I travel a lot,
Yep.
especially in the UK. Um, and our public transport, it is unreliable. There's not one week where I will get a full train on time, not a cancelled train, or get to one destination. At least once a week, I'm having to cancel a hotel visit or a night or change the day. Um, and for me, when I'm traveling on my own, okay, it's an inconvenience. I got to put up with it. But when I'm on those platforms and I see others that have to get home because of childcare or because of something, I don't think anyone really has a plan to solve this because I see it getting worse and not better. And from, I guess, the domestic traveler or through the country, it is tough. And I travel in Europe as well, and the infrastructure there is unbelievable. The infrastructure in Ireland is much better. But I do think that has an impact.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was in London in November for WTM, and I was blown away by the Elizabeth line. I was like,
Oh, it's brilliant. Yeah.
how does London survive for that
Mm-hmm.
long without it? I
Mm-hmm.
thought it was fantastic. But it did feel that, the owners and operators that I was talking to, there's somewhat of a chip on their shoulder, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
something that is, you know, holding them back or feeling proud of themselves, feeling good about themselves, right? So yeah, I want to shift a little bit to guest expectations and booking patterns, especially around UK and Ireland. You said that demand is strong across the board, whether it's in the UK and Ireland. But how are guest expectations changing or shifting these days from your perspective?
I think I think our guests are expecting something much more as an experience, more so than maybe material. With the world of social media that we live in, we get to hear what our guests think of us firsthand, real time, real life. And so that I use as a benefit because we're only as good as what our customer tells us we are, you know? Um, we spoke, we, I do think guests are less tolerant, and I think that is also aided by sometimes the frustration of getting to a hotel if they're using trains as an example, or for whatever reason. I think, you know, we all feel the impact of the cost of living in the UK. And I think so, you know, people are less tolerant. I value and I understand that guests expect a lot more value for money, a lot more rate conscious. And I think when, that's what we try and really instill in our hotels and our managers is to put yourself in the guest shoes. Our booking patterns are changing. It is shorter lead time. Expectations are a lot higher. Tolerance levels are a lot lower. And yeah, people are after an experience.
What does that experience look like these days? Is it, sport? Is it culture? Is it food? Is it all of the above? What do you see your guests mostly interested in experiencing?
It depends where they're going to. If they're going to city centre, it's either cultural, it's to attend an event. If it's going to more of a resort property, or it very much depends. We have got one thing in the UK. We've got so many event hub cities. We really do, and we are very very fortunate. Be it Birmingham, Leeds, Liverpool, Sheffield. We have so much going on, so there is a very high volume of event into those hub cities, if you will. So with them traveling, I think you're very much, if we take just looking at those event goers or sport goers, they're going for a full immersive experience,
Mhm.
So whether that venue is close to the hotel or they're having to travel, it's all about ease, convenience, but also immersing yourself to become part of that event because you're becoming part of that experience. You're part of that memory. For the business traveler, again, it's very much about convenience, about ease, about comfort. It's similar touch points, but maybe perhaps just different delivery,
Yep.
you know?
Interesting. And now these events haven't been new, right? They've always existed. Football. We should call
Mhm.
it football, like not the North American version.
Mhm.
Um, has been, you know, around for decades in many, many stadiums. So how do you think the guest experience have changed? Is it just more service, more value, more, I guess, shorter lead times? What has changed from your perspective?
In what, the stadium hotels or just
Well,
hotels in
just in
general?
general, from a guest expectation perspective.
I think it's all of the above. I think from a guest, I think a guest feels the pound more and has the
Okay.
value. You know, I think it's rare that you can really command such high rates unless you can match that experience with them. And that's why, it's so important because when we talk about social media and people can view a hotel, like people know booking.com or they know TripAdvisor, but there's also a lot of personal social media out there and TikToks and different things that influence decisions. I don't think we can underestimate the power of that. So people already have a perception: are they going to get the value for money? Are they going to get the experience they desire? And so I see a shift in that. I see a definite shift that people will book based on the reputation based on reputation more so than ever because they want that value for money. I do see in certain hotels the booking window being a lot shorter or being like peaks and troughs. It's spiking a lot more. Um, and maybe people aren't genuinely as organized as they used to be, or maybe there's other factors for that, and transport could be one of them. But I am seeing the booking window shorter.
In a lot of cases, and I see that from personal experience when I'm required to pay upfront my hotel
Mhm.
stay, which in a lot of booking platforms, you now have to do. Even when you book direct, sometimes hotels take a deposit. You kind of wait until you're 100% sure to book that stay because the expense, to your point, it's becoming a big expenditure, right? Like a 3-night stay over an event can be easily a few £100s.
Oh, at minimum. And even with the food, the food inflation on top of that, transport, you can't travel anywhere on a train for less than £100 if you're going from here to Birmingham or to London. So the costs are all increasing, and it's our job to become creative to ensure that we show value for money, you know? And then, but then again, from a hotelier's perspective, there's only so much that we can do because we have to cover costs as well. The national living wage, the national insurance, the business rates. I think we're going to see a lot of change come April when this really comes into force, especially hospitality sector. We know these rates are changing. We know we're getting hit with more costs. And, we are very lucky in the hotel industry, I guess, more so than maybe the smaller pub tech industries, in that we can leverage on technology to really help us make those efficiencies. Um, with your self check-in, check-out, your self concierge on your phone, different tools like that. But yeah, it's hospitality will always react. It will always rise. It will always, find innovation to succeed. And that's the beauty. It's very resilient, and hoteliers are very resilient. Um, I just hope in the next couple of years that things will ease, and we can maybe stop looking so much at trying to be innovative and find ways to save costs and make profit. Then we can really focus on that people element.
Is that where you think innovation does come from in your perspective? Is it mostly around cost cutting, or are there any other drivers that accelerate innovation in hospitality from your point of view?
No, I don't think if I don't class innovation as being cost cutting. I see innovation as more of a mindset. Um, I you know it helps support create efficiencies. You know, I think in if used the right way, in many respects, it can save those positions because you are creating efficiencies that you can then invest in your labor force. Um, I see a lot. We're all getting used to AI, and it's just erupting everywhere. I find many benefits from it, but I also quite fearful of it at the same time. But when I see it in the workplace, it's excellent. From really helping us personalize guest stays, from really helping us, with our to correspond, to generate ideas, to research. It does take a lot of time away. And, so I find it very useful. But I think we'll see a lot more of that evolving over the next few years. Um, But I do firmly believe that the winners in hospitality will be those that can combine technology, innovation, but still maintain that people connection.
Nice, nice. There's so many things I want to sort of double click on. You said benefits of AI. What is one or two things that you wouldn't miss AI these days? Is it search? You mentioned it, like the research portion has been shortened or has been accelerated.
And I can, because AI kind of gets used to, I guess, me.
Uh-huh.
It kind of gets to know me, so I can write into AI and drafting a response to my COO, for example, who likes things clear, concise, into the bullet points,
Mhm.
and it will pick up on that and help me draft or redraft an email that I know that he will take and appreciate. Equally, I can be talking to an owner that's thinking of investment or construction or conversion, and I can very quickly research that area. I can deep dive into AI, so I can give that owner or that potential investor some real concrete information and detail that might take me a good week or two to do, but now I can do it very, very quickly. But equally, so can they. They can look at areas too. I think if used in the right way, it can really help you make very good informed decisions. It can take away a lot of the administration we have to do. We don't know how far it can evolve into, do we?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and that's the scary part, right?
yeah.
In a way. And you mentioned also something in the context of innovation,
Mhm.
to keep the human aspect of hospitality, right? Like,
Yes.
and as you were talking about AI and,
Mhm.
keeping it human, how would you define the human aspect in hospitality in 2026? Like, what's that human touch?
It's when you go to hotel for whatever reason, it's with AI. I think there's a bit of a fear factor that they have to replace jobs. What I mean by the human connection is that hospitality as a whole is a people driven business. It's ensuring that we maintain that touch point. I'm seeing now in some parts of the world that they have, you walk into a hotel and you just check in completely by yourself, which is fine. We have some of those as well, but we still have somebody there. But you've got completely digitalized reception areas where maybe there's nobody. I think for me, that might be the way we go. But for me personally, I feel strongly about keeping that human element too, and that person. Um, we need to have visibility. We need to have presence. We need that engagement. We're emotive beings, and that's in the generation that I'm from. Now that might change in 10 years' time, but I hope in hospitality that we will still always keep that human connection. And also you know, I'm gonna kinda divert a little bit,
Sure.
but hopefully I'll bring it back and you'll understand, but this is but I'm hoping, when at 16, 17-year-olds, I'm passionate about the youth as well, we don't necessarily know what we wanna do at times, and
Uh-huh.
I think with some of the functions that AI can take on, which is great, there are entry-level jobs as well that help get people into employment, and I'm quite an advocate for, hospitality can open up many doors. I started off in housekeeping, had no idea what I wanted to do. Okay. And then it was a leader that believed in me. And I want to open the same doors for the youth of today. And if you get into hospitality, it's not just about the operation, it's not just about food and beverage, front office. There is IT. We're investing so much in IT and technology. It's such an exciting time to get involved in hotels if that's something you're interested in. We have to We have law, we have sales, we have marketing, we have finance. There's I don't think there's one industry that whatever kind of profession you wanna have can actually almost fit into hospitality in somewhere along the line. So, that's what, when I talk about those entry level, and those trainees, that's what I wanna safeguard so that we have those doors opened.
Aren't you afraid, and it's a genuine question, aren't you afraid that with automation, with, the technology you're implementing, that some of these entry-level jobs will disappear?
That's what I'm meaning. That's what I wanna safeguard against, yes.
Okay, okay.
That's what I'm sorry, that's what just to be per clear, that's what I wanna safeguard against, that we still keep that human connection, that we
Yeah.
s now, I understand the technology advancements,
Yeah.
we need them
Mhm.
to allow us to kind of maintain the employment and the labor that we do, because you need to create efficiency somewhere.
Mhm.
But I'm hoping this will all come full circle one day, and then maybe in 5 or 6 years, those costs will start to reside, and we will kinda get back to a bit of normality that we might have witnessed 20 odd years ago. No, but yeah.
Yeah. What's one piece of technology that I guess you're very excited to implement right now in your properties?
We are going with, we're doing a lot of work with our front office now. We're looking at, obviously this we have self-service kiosks in most of our hotels, but we are looking at the mobile check-in and the digital keys, and I think that's quite exciting, you know? And I guess from a sustainability perspective as well, from all these plastic keys and things that we're using, when you have the mobile key, it does play a part. I think sustainability is a massive part of innovation too in the next 5 years. Massive.
Nice, nice.
When we just when I mentioned that word.
No, but it's so true, right? And
Mhm,
when you think from a guest experience, I'd be very happy to fill out my guest registration, you
mhm,
know, on my mobile phone,
yeah,
right? I don't need to, and
mhm,
the airlines have taught us so well to do the
yes,
check-in
mhm,
online or check-in on our
mhm,
phone. It's time for hospitality to do that
yeah.
too, right? And
We've made massive advancements on the self check-in, checking out on on your phone. We can do that via pre-email or your phone. It's the next part of the digital key that you can use that same form, then you're checked in and your keys on your that's the
and
next
then
phase, please.
and that's it, right?
That's
That's
yeah, it's
awesome.
gonna be yeah.
Well, it beats queuing on a Friday night when you wanna get to a game or to a concert or something, and you're just excited about experiencing, you
Uh-huh.
know, the reason why you're traveling versus queuing at the front desk for, a long time, which does happen to me whenever I go to
Mhm.
Vegas or it's some real big,
Oh, yeah, Vegas, very nice.
Anyway, we're digressing.
Yeah.
I'm very curious. You mentioned UK and Ireland earlier in the context of
Mhm.
international domestic traveler. What's happening in that perspective? Are you seeing any meaningful shift, domestic international demand from where you're standing?
And like I said, Ireland, I see growth,
Hmm.
I see, it's it's got a very healthy corporate sector in Ireland. It's got a robust domestic travel. Dublin might remain the epic, the centre and the hub, but regional cities like Cork, Galway, Letterkenny, Limerick, we are seeing a rise in those regional cities as well. UK, like I said, it's more sensitive to the global conditions. It didn't help as well. A couple of hotels in Birmingham, and again, I don't know if you're aware of this, but for quite a period of time, there was no bin collections. So that has an impact. So you can imagine
I've
the
read that
street.
somewhere in the news. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I went to take a look and it was bad. And
Hmm.
so those things don't help, and that did have an impact on business. Um, we take a look at, you know, like we spoke about Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds are great event cities, great sporting cities, great vibe cities. So yes, those they're strong. We are seeing strong domestic tourism there too. From an international side of things, we've had a very good summer. Yes, we are very blessed in the UK that we have many national events. We've had a lot of events taking place, be it in London, be it the O2, be it on stadium concerts, and we've had that throughout the entire country, which has been wonderful. But I'm just a little bit more conscious, and I wouldn't say it's just more conscious with we touched on it earlier about the riots we witnessed in the summer. Some of the unrest that we're feeling in the UK, how is that being perceived internationally? Does it have an impact? And I
Hmm.
think, time will tell on that. But I guess from a global perspective, the UK's current challenges hasn't gone unnoticed.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, I am my eldest brother. We're kind of a hotelier family. He's one of the global directors for Rosewood Hotels, and he's based out in LA. And we talk quite a bit. And I guess I would ask him quite a lot. what's the perception over there about the UK? And he would phone me up and say, what is going on over there? You know? So does
I
that
guess
answer
we
your
all ask ourselves that question. I'm in Canada right now. What's going on
Oh,
over
yeah,
there?
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I forgot that too, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, we can keep chatting. Maybe we should check in once in a while, say what's going on. We
yeah.
can't talk about Radisson without talking about stadium hotels, right?
Mhm.
Because you already mentioned, some destination that you have in your portfolio that have big, I guess, stadiums and hotels in the same building combined. How do I need to envision that?
Well, we work, I'm from a sporting stadium hotel background before I joined Radisson, that's where I came from, so I'm quite passionate about this too. Um, you think about it, menopause and football, you can what a combination. Anyway, yeah, we work with, Bolton, Blackpool, the Twickenham, the launch there, we're heading for the launch of that one on Thursday night of this week. And obviously we have the Etihad Man City Medlock Hotel, the Radisson Blue opening, later in the summer. And those hotels, yes, are fully integrated into the stadium. So it's almost like for part of the inventory, you open your bedroom curtains and the pitch is right there.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an experience.
So you're sitting in bed and you see the pitch, like it's right
Yes.
there. Wow,
Mhm. Yeah.
that must have been an
Mhm.
amazing experience.
It is, it's unique even for the not so sport fan. It's something that you want, that you see, even for those that maybe aren't avid sports fans. It's just an experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It must behave very different from a traditional city hotel. Walk us through, I mean, you're very passionate about it, clearly.
Mhm.
Walk us through what sort of distinguishes a stadium hotel from a traditional city hotel. Same inventory, same size.
Okay, well, you've got when a sports or concert fan, it's emotive. The guests are emotive. They're coming they're coming for that full immersed experience. And from a stadium hotel, you have to, I guess, create that. You're part of that event. You're part of that experience. Um, Whatever happens on the pitch, you have to adapt, if you will, because if the team that you're there to support wins, listen, it's great to celebrate. Everybody celebrates. It's great. If that team loses, that mood can change. And again, you have to be creative and, post match to do something that kind of lifts that.
Mhm.
Um, but when you're in that hotel and the game's ongoing, you can hear the fans, you can hear the whole building shake. It's a wonderful experience for an employee as well.
Mhm.
But from an operator, it can be challenging in terms of, 6 days a week you can operate with maybe say, hypothetically speaking, 50 staff is your operating model. Then 1 day a week you've got to ramp it up to maybe 100 and odd staff to deal with a match day. And that can be difficult because you know yourself there can be fluctuations in standards. You can't maintain that number of casual employees, like constantly topping up, working with agencies. And that himself can have its own operational challenge. But there's ways around it. There's ways around it. And equally, although there's a real benefit of where, you open a business like a hotel in the stadium and you have 35 dates sold out already without having to do anything at weekends. That's great. Okay. Not many businesses can say they've got that consistently. Where the
At a
challenge
decent price, I assume, right? As well.
at a much more yielded price,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess where the challenge comes from is when fixtures change. Doesn't happen
Mhm.
very often, but it can happen. In my experience, we had when I used to be at a Stadia hotel, we had to outbook and cancel within 5 weeks' notice 3 weddings. That's quite tough. But, it's very clear in your correspondence and contracts that these things can happen, but operationally, that can be quite a logistical challenge.
So let me get this straight. I'm trying to get married at one of your properties, and somebody qualifies for the next round of Champions League, and it so happens that it's going to be played at that stadium. My wedding is not happening at the venue.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
Yeah. But if you remember it, yes, but you'll clearly know the risk when you book the wedding at a
Fair,
state
fair,
hotel.
fair.
However, whenever people do generally choose to get married at a stadium, it's because
Mhm.
they are diehard fans. They are associated and so embedded in with that club. They just want to get married there, you know?
So do they
So,
get 2 tickets to the game at least when they
oh yeah.
no.
Look, yeah, yeah. You know, it's a relationship, and that's one thing about the hotels with your sporting fans is that you have a real relationship
Mhm.
because your season ticket holders, I guess, feel very part of your hotel, feel very part if you are integrated. I'm going on Bolton's experience here because I was very, involved there. The fans and the supporters, they were involved. They wanted to support their club. And again, that was such a unique time because, yes, you had those dates of games and events sold for you, but also you had a network that people and other companies would spend tens of thousands for of these season ticket holders, company owners, sponsors that were so loyal
Yep.
to this footballing brand or and this club that you had that niche of where you could tap into. So it was a very good business model.
So as I'm listening to you, I'm wondering, your challenge is not the weekend games, right? Like
No.
you're always going to be full, you're going to be
Mhm.
busy, you're going to make a decent amount of revenue. How do you fill a stadium hotel the rest of the year?
That's the priority, that's the focus. You
Okay.
kind of you've got the given. Like I said, for me and my experience, it was very much building relations and networks with the season ticket holders. We built business hubs because we knew that whether it be Christmas parties or boardroom meetings or conferences, they would use us. Bolton were very smart. Bolton have because most stadia hotels are just outside the heart of the city with excellent infrastructure, great public transport links, great car parking. Now, Bolton were very smart in that we built a international sports program. So during that time, it was always during school holidays where your stadia hotels will be quieter because maybe the fixtures were finishing from May to August and everything else. You had international break in February, so again, it was enough peak time there during school holidays, and they must have had about 40 or 50 clubs that would come and visit their hotel every in between February, May, um, and the June, July period. And what they would do is they would come and live like a pro. It was marketed, come and train like a pro. So they would come and live in the hotel, stay in the hotel, groups of 30, between 4 and 6 nights. They would full board, they would train, then they would go to the academy, they would train over there, they would train in a pitch nearby at a school. But it was very, very, very well thought out and very, very well delivered. And it's got a great reputation. And I see that is happening at a lot of clubs. So, you have to tap in and I guess use your asset, but tailored to what you can, where you stand out. And that was smart. Mo-
What a great experience as a, traveler to experience that first have. Live like a, what did you say? Live like a pro? Was
Live
that
like
the
a
part?
pro, yeah. Live like
That-
a pro.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Oh, we always use things like, we'll always give you the home advantage. There's so many plays on words. If you look at our Radisson Red brand, it's quirky, it's a real play on words, it's lifestyle. This was, Stadia hotels are quite similar in that
Mhm.
they're distinct.
Suzanne, you're looking back at a career of what, 28 years or so in major hotel brands.
Mhm.
You've been named
It's like
Radisson.
gold.
Sorry. Yeah, well, we started with menopause. We may as well go back to, sorry, sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious, sort of because we talked a little bit about sort of the next generation. When you think of your leadership style, what leadership principles have stayed with you throughout that journey?
Um, it's a good question. I care deeply.
Okay.
Um, I have learned, and something I value very much is to decide clearly. Um, I can elaborate on that a bit if you want.
I was going to ask you, yes.
And then to execute relentlessly, but together. There's only so much I can do, but I have to do it with the team. So if we just make a decision clearly, it's clearly defined how we're going to execute that decision, then we relentlessly do it. And that comes everything from communication comes in there to how you bring everyone on that journey with you. But the big one for me is definitely care deeply, decide clearly, and execute relentlessly. That's
I think you can put a mic drop next to that. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Um, you know, we also talked about coaching, right? And sort
Mhm,
of bringing that next generation of, executives along the way.
mhm.
Why is coaching in hospitality specifically still treated as nice to have rather than retention strategy? What's your opinion? Like how do we get better?
I would have to challenge that from a Radisson perspective because, if I'm honest, because I do think it's our core retention and development strategy is part of our DNA. It's who we are,
Hmm.
and I don't see it as an optional extra. Um, we have a Radisson Academy, that's reinforced at every level, and it's backed by leadership buy-in. We sponsor it. We have to deliver on it. And I guess we really move, but I like to think we move beyond fixing the gaps. We're future proofing careers. And I think that ties back a lot to what we spoke about, with the whole AI and the entry level jobs. We do future proof careers. We integrate career conversations into development programs. You know, we very much have separate performance reviews and then development dialogue. And it's in our calendar. We do these twice a year. We have job chats. And it's not just something that's kept at hotel level. We have you know, a system that collates all of that information. And we have to do it as part of our targets. I then go once a year over to Brussels where I meet with our CEO, our COO, and our vice president of HR. And for all my hotels, I have to do a talent review. So I discuss the aspirations, the ambitions, the up and coming talent, who should be in spotlight, who should be, and I'm talking about not just from a GM or an HOD level supervisor, somebody that we see coming through the ranks from employee, supervisor, HOD, general manager, and beyond. So I think Radisson are very rightfully so are extremely proud of that.
That's amazing.
Mm.
So I assume if I ask you my next question, you'll
Mm.
probably challenge that assumption as well. But I'm wondering, um, how do we make, and I ask this to many hotel
Mhm.
operators and owners, how do we make hospitality attractive again from a career choice perspective, right? How do we make a hotel a great place to work?
The reality is hospitality is a great place to work. I
Okay.
think it's showing so much more flexibility. It's no longer, when you come back 20 years ago, you would think hospitality, 60, 70 hours a week, every single weekend. It's not like that. I think, we're getting a lot better at promoting. It's not just about the operation, but like we spoke earlier, you can go into legal, you can go into sales, you can go into marketing, you can go into social media, you can go into PR, you can go into finance. There is so many distinct um, career paths that you can have when you come into hospitality. And I'm starting to speak now more at universities, and so are my colleagues, because even to high schools, for those people that don't know what they want to do, I didn't know what I want to do. So I went traveling, 16, 17, went and started working in housekeeping, and you climb the ranks because because they do have invested training. So I think we just need to tell our story. I think we need to tell our testimonials, if you will, as to how, because I didn't expect to come in, become an MD, a hotel group. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I see the same confusion in my own 17-year-old son. It's like, I don't really know what I want to do, mum. And goes, well, decide quickly, because if you don't, you're going to start in hotels. Because then you can do anything. You can do engineering, you can do whatever. You can do a trade. But it's a really good, secure environment to grow while you're working out what you want to do. And I guarantee most people, when they start in hotels without an idea of where they want to go, they will end up doing something they love within hospitality.
And if I understand you correctly, your argument is also that hospitality is such a diverse
Yeah.
theme, right? So even if you get started somewhere, you may end up being specialized in
Mhm.
a very specific area that is
We
highly
have
qualified.
many leaders. We have many leaders who are doing specialized functions like finance directors, who are doing maybe marketing, who started off in an operational role,
That's
who were
amazing.
invested in as they went through. And that's the beauty. And the same thing happens at many other hotel chains as well. They had the same opportunities.
So hospitality must be doing something right in coaching and training these entry-level employees to become executive leaders such as yourself.
Hmm.
What is hospitality doing right in order to advance a career like yours?
I think as hospitality has evolved, we are a people industry. So I think very clearly we know how to invest in people. We know, there has been, we work with some incredible professionals who design and work with our leadership programs that evolve and adapt over time, that are currently evolving to, incorporate our technology now as well. But also, you know, hospitality is built on relationships. If you see a spark in talent, it could be anything. We allow it to grow. We don't mold it. We allow it to grow. And I think as a leader, I'm very, very aware of that. Um, but does that answer your question?
It does. It does. I mean, what you're articulating is that we are a people's business
Mm,
that cares about its, I guess, asset, which is the people, right?
yeah.
And informs an environment in which we can excel and become the best version of ourselves. I'm sorry, I'm paraphrasing. Is that
No, you paraphrased that very well. We are a people business, and I guess we know how to develop and manage people. You know, because what happens from within is what comes out. So we know from our internal departments we have to treat people correctly. We have to train them. We need to train them. We have to, have succession planning at every level. We actually, to kind of resonate what I'm saying from a Radisson perspective, when we look from, as a team of leaders, we have certain targets that are bonused every year. And equally, and on there, we have financial targets. We have another target, which is a development of our people. So how many people were promoted from supervisor level up? How many people went through the accelerate? How many people? And I love that because people is up there as much as any kind of profit performance. And I think that's a telling sign of how important it is.
before we wrap up, I love it, by the way. Before we wrap up, I want to do a quick rapid fire and then talk to you about your next trip, your next personal trip, because I'm very curious around where you vacation, where you holiday, where you're going, how do you unwind when you're not working in hotels? Because that's always an interesting question for a hotelier to
Mhm.
ask. Um, so rapid fire, stadium concert or sold out match night? Which one do you prefer?
Oh, match night.
Okay. Event guests, best customer or hardest work?
Hardest work. Feeling the influence, but hardest work.
People or profit, which is harder to protect right now?
Both under the UK and the climate, both.
Okay. London still king or losing ground? And if so, to whom?
Still king.
Still king?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Suzanne, where do you vacation?
Huh.
Or how do you vacation?
Mm,
Whichever.
How
Pick
do I do
one.
it? I live in the Mourne Mountains. I'm from the Mourne Mountains in Northern Ireland, and because I do travel so much within Europe and within the UK and Ireland, I do like going home. I switch off at home because I do, and that's being honest. However, I do, I love Italy. I love Italy, you know? I love, I've got to explore France quite a bit more, which has been interesting, which has been very, very good. And, but my favorite in the last 2 years has been Croatia. Because it was unexpected
Okay.
and my phone didn't work.
Wow. Okay.
So I am lucky I get to travel, but,
How many days of no phone did you have? That must have been
4,
quite the
yeah,
sorry?
4 days of no phone.
That must have been quite the experience.
And day 1, it was a bit that panic mode, wasn't it? It was a bit like, "Oh my goodness." Day 2, you began to start to kinda get used to it. Day
Mhm.
3, I switched off, and then day 4, the thing switched back on again.
Oh,
There
no.
was a signal, but it does make you actually think how much you're attached to your phone and to that noise. I need to get better at that. I need to get better at switching off.
On that bombshell, thank you so much for joining the program today, Suzanne. Have a
Thank
great
you.
afternoon, and I can't wait to see the session go live. Thank you for listening. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to avoid missing the next episode. It helps us produce better shows and get the most interesting guests. Thank you for your support.